Chilly crickets, folks. Chilly crickets. What's it going to take for us to start doing what we need to do? In enough mass, and that's the problem, in enough mass that it starts to count. And that said, I'm leading with this today about not doing much, but this has been a week. This last week was really a lot coming together. There's a few people out there doing something, and that encourages me a lot, because as I've been telling you, we just need to step up and do that thing that just isn't, we find it so wrong that we have to make it right, and we have the power to fix that. It doesn't just happen at the stroke of a key, and it doesn't just happen at the idea. In fact, you start learning what natural law is, you realize that the thought, this travels maybe even greater than the speed of light, and yet to get that to come into the mass of the world, the substance of the world, it takes a lot of energy translated. And what's interesting is that little snap of idea is the energy that's translated into physical substance. And there's people that are doing what they can, and it's working. And so I just want to encourage you, for all the crickets we might hear, for all the silence we look out and see not happening, as I look out, if I was just to take the fact of the non-response to all the things I see, I would have given up a long time ago if that was all I had to notice. And so if you're someone who kind of can't figure out what's up, there's something up. It's going down the tubes. But that's just us giving in, and I see it all around us, what's going on. I touched base a little bit. We had a miner that decided to take on a problem. Some people were going to take advantage of a whole lot of other people, and I was able to hear what his story was about that condition at the mining district meeting here this last Friday, and I got to hear some more of what it took. And he had to do the research. He had to do the legwork for what all that might have been. He had to do the conversations with people in the town that might have been interested. He put flyers out. He communicated with the county. He had, most importantly, he had the law correctly interpreted that he asserted. And then he told us that he finally did his final presentation. He had to go down to the county and literally stand there and do his presentation. So he had to be at least certain enough to be able to do that. And, our guidance here all the time is you just stay on the bright line of the law. Follow that narrow path. And he did that. And he prevailed. And what was pretty astonishing to hear later at the meeting was what I hadn't known before. And a lot of this I really didn't know. I just in touch with them here and there about strategies on what had to be done and what to be careful of. And even though a commissioner might say that they're on a board with you, that you watch out, they're probably just telling you that. They're politicians first, politics. And there's two things we're up against: is the lack of knowledge. Actually, three things for an official: lack of knowledge, the depth of the understanding of what their oath actually meant to be consistent with law and acting thereby, and then they're agenda driven. They've got their own thing going. The private gain type thing. So they called them offices of profit in some regard, although they weren't supposed to be at the detriment of the people. So you have these things working that you have to know to address. Well, it didn't come to find out after he made his speech, he actually knew the law enough, and he was going to be affected, that he had to put himself on the line. And this is where it comes down to. He said, if the commission will allow this bill that it creates this taxing district on a whole bunch of people, I'm going to be looking to remedy that in a court of law. And so he put himself on the line to do that. And this is not a threat. This is an actual promise in a way that you're going to let them know that you're on notice now not to trespass here. And he prevailed. The county commissioners voted 2-1 not to allow the bill that would have created a taxing district that would tax a bunch of people without their say and input. They would not put that on the ballot. So The interesting thing, I said 2-1. Listen, I said 2-1. Despite the hearing of the law, one commissioner was still going to vote to impose a taxation district on other people. And so this is the latent crime, even in the face of the victory, that persists in our system that we continue to allow. So I wanted to touch base a little bit on that. I'm just thrilled for, again, he told me the lessons that he learned in doing this. As I tell you, I can't tell you what you'll learn that is going to be way and beyond what I can ever describe to you. Not only do you learn certain things, but you have perception changes, you have action changes, it's a confidence building. You push yourself to the limit and beyond, and you find out we can do a lot of things, and a gentleman fairly much single-handedly engaging the problem in all of its positions. As I said, you put flyers out, you talk to people, you get them informed, and you persist, and you put yourself on the line, and you can prevail. To the point that one of the reasons why, to my surprise somewhat, which shows you again this latent continuing crime, a potential for crime, and you have to be aware of this. But the information got back to him through people that have been watching in on this, what he was doing, and after the vote got taken down, he told us that he was told that the commission was blindsided by the law. Blindsided by the law, folks. These are people that took an oath to uphold the law. They were blindsided by it. And this is what I tell you we do, and I'm asking you to do. And it's why you don't have to put yourself in jeopardy when you walk that narrow path, that we're told to walk that narrow path. And we found it's really in the law. If you know the adulterer, how you know that the law is supposed to mean something, and it's supposed to do, it has a purpose, and you hold to that purpose and intention and that objective, and all the other stuff you start identifying as a crime, you are in the power. And the law, this thing that we're all supposed to be following, to show you how fallen we are as a society, how little regard we put on it, how more of a regard we put into the Bar Association to re-represent it to us through their private discussions and machinations. How far we've fallen from instituting and being vigilant to maintain the law, that when you assert the law, it blindsides the system that was duty-bound to protect it. So I want, again, my hat's off to the miner. A lot of work. This is a lot of work, actually, and he did it. He pulled it off. And, whatever he needed apparently was enough to help him to come together and pull that off, and he did it. He's standing right there. And then the surprise statement, the surprise observation. We still got someone in the office that wants to maintain an action contrary to the law, doesn't it? And that the system itself was blindsided by the law. Well, my question to you then is, then where are these bar association members? What are they doing? And I'm just trying to pull some stuff together for you to kind of confirm there's a way to look at this that actually just cuts right through the nonsense, and pretty soon you gain the confidence to even go against those that would profess to be the experts. And experts say, you find out that experts aren't really anything. They are the facade. They are part of the facade, and I've been asking you to step up against that. And it's easily defeated. I mean easily in the sense that once you lay out what the law is and you're committed to it, and you're going to be there to be committed to it, not much can come against you unless it's the most blatant of criminals. And that's a refined space. There's not actually many of those. Well, if we took this example, 2/3 of the population, as represented by those commissioners, would not challenge you. There is 1/3 that might. So that's reducing the odds quite a bit. It's not the entirety of the society. It's only quite a few. And then as you push it harder and harder, if you get the opportunity and you push it harder and harder, and you started pushing on the authorities, let's say a government official has taken on for themselves essentially their oath of office to do the law, to maintain the law, or their oath of office in the capacity of a local county or local government to protect the property and the land and the disposals. When you start coming from that foundation and you start showing, well, listen, you took the oath, I didn't. You undertook to do this, and you're going to be held liable privately because you're not. And you get to those people one-on-one and you explain that's the fact, then you're going to find out there's a very, very small amount of people that are willing to push you and your certainty. Again, this is not an opinion. I don't just go out and say, I'm going to sue you. You have built the case that they don't have a case. They're not going to be able to respond. And they're going to be hanging out without any protection because they didn't really follow the law at all. As, again, we found out, and we proceeded over a year ago to assail the oppression that's been in the state of Oregon through the governor, through the Bar Association, the political parties. You know, our lawsuit, I talked about that. That's really been coming through. We couldn't be any more, we couldn't have put the stake any closer to the center of the heart of the beast than our lawsuit has done. And I will get to a point here in the broadcast when we go through my tabs here, we talk about subject matters. We were, myself and the other party to our lawsuit in the Jefferson Mining District. The interim chairman was with me on a broadcast interview where we only had like 39 minutes of time, broadcast time to do it, but I think we did a fairly decent job in explaining the condition. That is what you're seeing, maybe not direct. We can't certainly prove direct connection, but the subject matter that's taking down the governor of Oregon, one of the parties to our suit, is exactly what we sued on. And when you look now that people are investigating, you're looking to see, we put the knife in the heart of the beast. They're finding the tendrils, and I'm using all their research now to tie together all the places this oppression is in the world. And now we've got news that it's actually gone not just interstate but international. As I told you, this is a very large problem that we were able to tie into and to expose. So the fruits of that are developing now. Last week was been a ton of work. We have it just became so many things to think about, and we have even more to do now that we will have a judgment in law. We now have the enforcement of that judgment, and as I was writing up the things that are available for us to do, it's pages and pages. So when you get to an enforcement action part, and you have a lot of things to do, and that's going to take a lot of people to do, and I'm hoping that for us, for our sake, that we have people to step up and start taking on more and more of what we now have we have proven we have right to. So one thing I want to get real quickly, let's get on the tabs, and we'll get back to that story here in a future the broadcast, but I mentioned that gentleman in Seattle, that black man that was on the cane that had the cop attack him, and she said that he took his golf club as a cane, and the golf club he took and was going to hit her with it, her car with it. So she came and riled him up. And I told you my problem with all that was that for the gentleman's sake, he got off the camera. Well, here's an example. As I keep my eyes out for this kind of thing. Innocent man facing years in prison, now free. Officers arrested, charged with conspiracy. My concern for the gentleman that was accosted by the cops in Seattle was that he stepped outside of the view of the camera. We're now in the society, we laugh at the Russian drivers having now to have cameras on all their cars because it's so bad over there that they want to make sure that they have a camera running when an accident happens to prove they didn't cause it. Well, this is happening, we laugh at the cars, this is happening to each one of us in the United States of America. The home of the free and the land of the slave, folks. If we didn't see it before, I mean, that's pretty clear now. And not even that. Now you're just enemy combatants subject to arrest and beat down and torture. As a presumption now, understand. And the presumption's a pretty thin rebuttal problem because they don't give you much to argue when you got no venue to go to argue that, do you? So remember about that apparently maybe unusable habeas corpus, but use it nonetheless to get you back out and at least have an argument that maybe they're committing fraud in all the ways I've told you before. But here's exactly the reason I was telling you, don't get out front of that camera. You may have to keep one in your pocket. You may, in fact, I've got so much stuff to go through, but I have a little, they're so small now, it's pretty fascinating. I have a key fob camera. I'm going to have to get it back out. They have key fob cameras. Get one, folks. Keep it on your keys. They have one on a watch. Get that one. Get one that's sufficient to take audio. Get one that's sufficient to see the video. At least have it running when you get into a confrontation with these officers. Because without the evidence, you're going to be, it's already a setup against you. This is almost becoming now Don't leave home without this stuff. And as I say that, as I was thinking about the little camera I have as it was given to me for the same purpose, I don't get out much. So it's kind of gotten put behind and buried. I'm going to have to dig it back out and have it available because of this very thing. In other words, I'm going to have to really get diligent on practicing what I tell you to do. That I don't have much, I don't get out much, so it's not. In fact, getting out the other day, we went down to the county and talked to the legal counsel down there about coordination. It's like a new, like I haven't done this for months, months and months. It's a new experience for me just getting out and around. So I don't get out much, and so these things don't come to my mind. But I want to remind you, based on this case, this is imperative. You have to have a camera anymore around you. If you don't have one, make sure you stay in front of those cruisers that do have a camera, because this was the beginning and the end of an issue that could have went very badly. 2 police officers have just been indicted on charges of conspiracy and misconduct. But until a dashboard video was released, the man who they victimized was actually the one in trouble. Until the dashboard video was released, the man who they victimized was actually the one who was the criminal. And you know they pile on these charges, and the prosecutors don't mind helping. Officers accused Marcus Jeter, 30, of eluding police. Prosecutors said he faced these charges in Newark Superior Court and was originally facing years-long prison sentence. But that was when the video of the New Jersey officers Orlando Trinidad and Sean Courtner, both 33, had not yet been released. Once it was, the tables turned very quickly. The first plea was 5 years, Jeter explained. But when Stephen Brown, Jeter's attorney, filed a request for records, you have to remember this, folks. Listen, under NDAA, you get sucked up, you don't get an attorney, or, as we found in San Francisco, they beat your attorney down and steal you away. You have to know how to do this. Why? Because you have to know how to search your rights, and you have to express them, as we've been hearing. You can't remain silent on your right to remain silent. That the attorney, and you should too, the attorneys here are only representative of your rights. That you should be able to do this in the first instance without the attorney, and you'll have to remember how to do this, even under the strain of the condition. And this is across the board, I guess. I don't talk about, this is not really discussing one issue, oh, you get stopped by a cop in the street. This is across the board, across interference by any governmental agency, any governmental employee. Which I can show you is if they do that under color of authority to diminish your property and rights and remedies. I've told you over and over, that's a theft by extortion felony in the first instance. If these cops are armed, that's aggravated. And if you know how to say that, if you got that in your mind, you stick that word in your mouth and you express it, it starts to set the record, and everything becomes a whole lot straighter quicker. But the attorney filed a records request. Remember to do that immediately. This is critical. And this is critical in this case. And it was critical that in the video that you can see what was going on, because the frame held the entire record. Not like the gentleman that was in Seattle with the golf club. He got off the front of the car, and we didn't know what happened after there. Luckily, it didn't go too bad. But he was 70. Maybe that helped a little bit. We don't know. But his attorney filed a records request. The dash cam video showing what really happened in June of 2012 showed that the police were the real criminals in the case. The video shows Jeter with his hands clearly above his head. The next thing I know, one of them busts the door and there's glass all over my face, Jeter told a local TV station there. As soon as they opened the door, one officer reached in and punched me in the face as he's trying to take off my seatbelt. I'm thinking, something is going to go wrong. And you know how close he was probably for that. The cops kept telling him to stop resisting and claimed that he was going for their guns. Nothing could have been further from the truth. You're hearing how they developed the case against you. I don't know if you've heard the video. Some people will actually call out, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I would actually say you're lying. You have to set the record at that moment. You have to be clear of mind, beyond the shock that these people are doing this to you. You have to be of sound mind and respond. Don't be surprised, I guess, is the point here. Don't be surprised at the war that you're in, and don't maybe realize these other people are willing to do, and they're doing it under the color of authority. Jeter subsequently had all the charges dropped, and both cops were arraigned on charges of conspiracy, official misconduct, tampering with the records, and false swearing, according to Essex County prosecutors. Remember, these are the same ones that were going to send him down the river, right? You have to understand the problem here and what we expose essentially in our Jefferson Mining District lawsuit. As it was asked on an interview, well, what does that mean when you went to a court and they weren't available? And I said, well, you're looking at the self-evident proof that you don't have a government anymore. Not the tripartite government, not one that's by the Republican form of representative government, which was one of our charges, that these entities we sued have destroyed that. See, people don't even they asked the question. He didn't. The one who asked that question really doesn't understand. You're looking, folks. This is the evidence. You're looking at the proof. You no longer have a Republican form representative government. There are no checks and balances. We are at the point that I told you. This is extrajudicial. It always has been. And unless you have evidence, it's presumed you've done wrong 100% of the time, and the occupier and military force is completely right. And the bar that they have to scale is about would only trip an ant. Yours, you're going to have to be doing the Fosbury flop on if you can do that. And this is telling you that the occupied forces, you think as a police officer, it's a military soldier in this war against you, Battlefield America. That all they have to do is just maintain a couple of words, like they feared for their life. They're going for your gun. I mean, you're going to do this, that, and the other, or not do something that's so absolutely heinous that it riles the natives, because that's the number one rule for occupying forces, is don't piss off the natives. There's a lot more of them, and they'll run you out if they're aware. So don't do that. It's just a pragmatic condition. So I'm looking at I could read and read and read. It's amazing to me. Amazing to me. We put up with this. And so as we go back and talk about what do, you make policies that's not going to happen anymore. You figure out ways and articulate for people that are shocked or are shocked by the law. You bring more. These people are not smart enough. They need more guidance, even more than the ones they have. And again, these statutes are really on the government, not us, and we haven't figured that one out either. So all I really wanted to point out here is, until there was evidence that the wrongdoing was by the cops, that could have been you facing this monumental task. So please, if you could remember, try to stay within the camera shots anymore of whatever camera you think. In fact, I would be almost focused on that, and I'd ask them, where's your camera focused? I want to be there before we proceed. Because I believe, and I would put it on the record, I think because you're stopping me and you haven't articulated a basis or whatever it would come out at the moment, I believe you're setting me up through a fraudulent claim. And I'm putting you on notice of that, because I'm going to go after you if you are. And you just go, maybe you're setting your death warrant when you say that, but at least it's on the dang record, and if anybody ever gets it, it's right there. So this didn't happen in this case. Luckily, the tape comes out. He's always in the frame, and they see exactly what's going on in the video. It can't be explained anywhere else. The excuse that you can't tell, that a video doesn't tell the whole story, didn't affect itself here, did it? And so that's the other thing they go out. I wanted you to I wanted to remind you, this is so important anymore. Stay in front of a camera somewhere. If I could afford it, and I thought, and if I didn't consider them concentrated evil, and had the funds to get one, and I wanted to, these new phones that can upload video directly to a server is probably one of the most secure ways to do any of that, and then they don't worry about whether or not your phone got stolen. But again, if you don't put your mind around this, you will be surprised, and it will be only because someone else with a thought afterward. In this case, the attorney asking for the record, which is normally normal. But understand that those discs and those tapes can get lost, okay? So, well, this is the other problem. You have to have your own independent test there, don't you? Own independent documentation. So, I don't know what your answer is. I don't know that I would get a camera, but that could do all that, because you can see the silent weapons of quiet wars. That's a tool of surveillance, and who knows if maybe you're at that point maybe your signal gets messed up too. But the point is you need to have independent verification and tapes if you are going to leave the cameras. This was critical in this case. Critical. And I want you to consider that. Consider the import of this story as related to what I said before and my initial concern for the gentleman that was stopped by the cop who got walked off of the camera view. So if we didn't know any more about how the cops do it behind the scenes, it's coming out, folks. It's kind of interesting what's falling out, and I think this is all just evidence, and they're telling us this is now fact, and we could all go back to sleep and say it's not important. No, they're doing it anyway and give in and just say that's just the way it is, and we'll just have to suffer it, or we are going to stop it. And then you use these as evidence. I tell you, my tabs are really evidence of you can go in and say, well, listen, it's happening in another jurisdiction. I don't see why it's not happening here. So we're going to make a policy, and you're going to do some assurances and some guarantees that this kind of corruption is not going on. Deputy at Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office tells about planting evidence, lying in reports, and testimony under Sheriff Rick Bradshaw. One of the biggest offenses in contraband cases are that the law enforcement officers planted evidence and lied to make their arrests. The cries from defendants are largely ignored by all parties involved, including the juries, because of psychology. This is another element in all of this, folks. It shows you your juries are no protection anymore, as I proved to you in a prior discussion, a prior broadcast. When is the word of a defendant against a law enforcement officer perhaps has been conditioned to rely on the word of authority as truth? The question is, should this be the case? Well, my broadcast stands for the proof that it cannot stand as the case. In fact, that's been a fabricated authority from top to bottom, and you challenge that a so-called color of authority. It's all a color of authority. That defines for you it's a fraud. It's all a color of authority. In fact, if you look and read enough, you'll find that the courts only speak to this authority as a color of authority. When you look close enough, you're going to find out the statutes are only presumptions of law. They're not the law. And if you can find out better, you bring it forward. You destroy that so-called law. This is how they're getting us. This is how they can get thousands and thousands of bills through the legislature that are presumed lawful. They claim the back door they give you to say, well, if you can prove otherwise, you win. To me, is a violation in the first instance that they allow to themselves, which shows you they're not lawful. They're an occupier on your land. And you need to start knowing that. I mean, beyond my opinion, beyond your opinion, you have to know that. See, I know that. And I know it in lots of ways. And I guess I'm coming to a realization, and I've known it for a long time, but it's just owning up to the fact at some point you do know. At some point, these people that are out there are criminals. They are criminals. And there's nobody that can question that in me, and I don't I don't allow a question on that. If I have a set in my mind and in my proofs and the evidence, I can prove that someone's a criminal, though I hope they're not. But if I can show that they are, or if I tell them you better back off because here you've gone into criminal land, and they don't, I am not at all abashed, shameful at all to assert that they're a felon. It's not my opinion, and they're not going to have an authority at that point, which is interesting when I get to our case, discussing that a little bit more, if it occurs to me to say. There's nobody that can come against you. I mean, it's just once they've agreed to being the criminal, and you've pointed it out through how do you do that? You present the objective basis, which is the law they took an oath to uphold. If they're in violation of that, they're done, as far as I can see. The situation may not be done, but at least you're establishing that record. Hopefully you're recording it. one of our editors stumbled across a website where a local law enforcement deputies were free to post, and so with 100% anonymity they were posting on a website that exchanged tactical information, procedural tips, and methods to use to gain compliance of subjects to arrest them for being difficult. So listen how low the bar, like I said, the bar is. They just wait for you to be difficult. So you're going to have to understand this. I want to read it's a long read here for the one of the explanations. What they show, just to let you know, just an example and paraphrase of a statement that's on there on this website that I'm reading from. They talk about a cop who explains how he plants empty bags of cocaine because just the residue is enough. He plants it in people's cars, and where he keeps that is underneath his mat, underneath his front seat. And so the excuse is there that, that just got lost, stuck to his shoe in another site, and just happened to be floated into his car. So then now they've thought this through to exonerate themselves from what would have been a crime. See, this is how deep they think about trying to violate you. That you have to understand how deep you're going to have to think to stop it. That I thought this report and admissions were important. That it's not a secret that we've heard that they plant evidence. They as you see, they'll just indict you and just press the issue, knowing that it's on you to prove the difference. But here are what the evidence of what they will do, and they'll do a lot more. This is only the stuff that's been listed to try and set you up for something that is not something you do, that they know they can easily beat you down with. That I wanted to make you aware of this. Now, how you protect yourself against someone planting a baggie of cocaine, how do you get that evidence? I don't know. I want you to know that that's how the level of criminality that these people under color of authority are bringing against us, that if you take this ahead of time, this evidence that it's done over there, and you don't accept that it's not done everywhere, and you go to your local police sheriff or whatever, whoever it is, or you go to your county and say, this is a potential harm, and maybe even you do some more digging and you notice there's a lot of maybe these cocaine, normal traffic stop where it was a taillight, all of a sudden there's a cocaine charge. Maybe look into those cases a little bit. Maybe make a phone call. Find out what was the story behind it. And then you find out, wait a minute, there's a lot of just broken taillights that all of a sudden become drug cases, which all of a sudden the people lose their car. Maybe you're on to one of these problems that you can go to your seats of decision, your commissioners, your city councils, your sheriff, and you say, listen, here's evidence that it happens, here's their admission, that nationwide they come to a website to plan and create strategies and tactics on how they're going to hurt people, and I want you to assure me it's not happening here. You're going to make a policy that stops it. And I don't know what the resolution would be. But you may have to sit down and think about that, and you may be the insight that comes to that answer. To me, it's a whole lot better that when they stop us, and this is what I tried to do when I got the rose-colored glasses slapped from my face. In fact, the Supreme Court had instructed me to do this. Found out really quickly that it didn't. This is where part of the rose-colored glasses that got slapped. The cops don't listen to the Supreme Court necessarily. And they don't mind shooting you and then justifying it. This is a whole new thing. This is 30 years ago, folks. So, not new, but it was new for me then. That at the time, the Supreme Court was saying, go ahead and get out of your car, because at least the cop can see you don't have a gun, you're not carrying, you're not throwing anything away, and you're not hiding anything, you're not concealing anything, and so step out the car. Keep your hands out, on your side, not necessarily up, but at your side. Take slow moves. So I did just that. That happened to be the wrong thing with someone who wants to have you do what they say. Didn't matter what I was doing. And whatever I did, they were going to order me to do the opposite, until the fact is they'll order you to do all 5, 6, 7 things all at once. And if you don't do that, and they're all opposite things, how do you get down and stand up at the same time? And this is the kind of orders that they say. And so when you don't do one of them, they just shoot you. Or they use it as you're not. They just use it as a theory that you weren't complying. So you start learning their techniques just on the wrong side of the gun, if you will, and we learn the hard way that I'm trying to advance to you that we don't do. and that it seemed to me if you step out, and the Supreme Court seemed to be reasonable there, I would step out and I would show them I'm cool and everything would be much better. Well, it wasn't and it isn't. And so what they do, I still think that's a good idea. So maybe you go to your police and you say, listen, when you stop people anymore, because we can't trust you, you will have them in front of a camera and you will have them get out of their car. In fact, you will start publicizing that people will get out of their car and stand by their car with their hands at their sides. And so we will make a campaign that people can at least be seen outside of the car. And we can at least start stopping some of the things that allow cops to do what they're doing to harm us. And we start dictating to them the protocol. You will declare the probable cause. It will be substantial. You will declare your right to enter the car without consent. You will not even ask for consent. We can make all these rules and policies and we could submit them and you get that to stop this nonsense because these people are not that intelligent. They have to be told like little kids, every little thing. They're not so stupid to not remember what they're supposed to do or that they'll be in trouble if they don't. They remember that part. Just like a little kid. Insane children and adolescents, folks. They know where the limit is and they know they're going to get in trouble. So they're always working on whether or not they're going to get caught. And so you have to make sure that the line to get caught is drawn very clearly and definitely. And you don't let them get these out. So enough there. This is very serious admission. It's happening in Florida. It happens everywhere. And I'm asking us to step up where we can to stop this so that we don't become a victim to our own inaction. Once we're given notice, this is what's going on, as well as this one. Make arrest, issue tickets, or get fired. Missouri, police caught in a disgusting quota scheme. It's Missouri. I call it Missouri. A former Bellefontaine Neighbors police officer has come out of the quota closet and is exposing the department's highly unethical revenue collection scheme. What did he just define there, folks? The department's highly unethical revenue collection scheme. Revenue collection at the point of the police or military is martial law. Those of you that are tuning in today that have never heard that before, or those of you that haven't forgot, go read the Lieber Code. I think it's on the Avalon website. Go find the Lieber Code. That first sentence declares you live under martial law. Not because I say so, because the Lieber Code, which is international law, says so. Remember, that's under international law. It doesn't mean that because the government's acting extrajudicial doesn't mean that you don't follow what you were told in the Lieber Code that says that the presence of the military is the notice to you that you're under martial law. They don't have to proclaim it. Why every host you hear everywhere that says it's coming, you'll be told, or this and that, is telling you stories. It's just wasting your time. I don't even know why people go and listen to it. 10-year veteran of the force, Officer Joe St. Clair, was ordered to carry out a policy that he says required cops to issue a certain number of tickets and even traffic arrests. If the cops failed to do it, they could be fired. I'll stop and we can read this on and on. I've talked to you about this before. I've told you when you go to your statutes in your corporate states, that's what the statutes are about, and you'll notice that there is something called disposition of fees. This is how I proved the states are military organizations, because of their disposition of fees statute. Now, I don't know what it's going to be called in everybody's state. This is one of the problems with the 50 states. They can hide all these same things in different terminology, and it's very hard to track them down. So what I say in one state may not be the same for the next state, but it's still happening in the next state under a different term. This is term obfuscation. This is actually military intelligence, military technique and tactic to keep you not understanding what you're up against. But disposition of fees is the statute I finally found. This is years and years ago. I don't have it before. I don't have anything before me when I'm talking to you. So excuse me if I'm kind of get a little thinking about it. I'm trying to all of a sudden a memory comes and I go, oh, sorry, that's where that was. Disposition of fees. You'll find out that the statute or the state statute says that a certain amount of fees will go here, a certain amount of the fees will go there, and a certain amount of fees will go somewhere else as revenue from the plunder they stole from you in through the citation from the cops. That's the definition of martial law. I hope you picked that up, folks, how simple this is. Now, from that, I also rationalize you don't have to have a quota system. This shows how stupid the people in Missouri are. And the cops, more importantly, that they even set up a quota system. Because it ends up being the same thing. They could be fired. All that has to do, you don't set up a quota. You just put pressure on the officer that if they're not doing by a standard without saying it's a quota, you talk about it in this regard. Well, you know that the department's having a funding problem. And if I don't get the funding to run the patrols, we might lose a couple officers. Oh, by the way, some of that funding we get from the writing of tickets and arrests. Have a nice day, officers. Be safe. I don't have to make a quota system. I just put it in the bug in the ear that somebody may be losing their job because as a department I don't have the money, and we get our money from those tickets and arrests. I don't have to make a quota system. And I'll guarantee you those tickets will be written, those arrests will be made. And so this is really it's a no more notice to us. It happens. It's a piece of paper. It's a story you can take, do some more research, conform it to where you need to go. Go into your police office, say, "Are you doing this?" Go look for disposition of fees. Say, "Hey, this is an illegal law here, unless you are an occupying force. That you get money from your take." And that's all you're seeing in forfeiture, aren't you? You're seeing the evidence you live in martial law, under military rule. It's not that big a stretch and that hard. Our court case proves we have no judiciary, which at least means we don't have a tripartite system of government, which means you don't have the constitutionally established government that you think exists, despite it looks like there's something sitting there. It's a surrogate, and I actually used the word surrogate on the interview, but I actually thought about that after, and I said I made a mistake because the statutory term for that is substitution. This judiciary is by the Bar Association is a substitution. So is the state. The corporate state's a substitution for what was supposed to be de jure and constitutional as people thought. So I use the word surrogate. It's actually more accurate to say substitution. In international law, that word is called supplantation or supplant. That's an overthrow, that word. So they're all very closely connected. Missouri cops, they're not smart enough to keep it real simple. Listen, folks, I don't have the money in my district, in my department. We may have to lose a couple officers unless we can up those funds. And we get our funds from doing this and this and this. What do you think, folks? And they don't need a quota system. That you can find evidence of one, you better copy and paste and put this in your bag of facts about moving your oppression, going against the oppression that you see. Again, I'm just bringing you really not the stories of the news. I'm bringing you what I see in the news that they're telling us that we necessarily need right now to cut through the excuse of that substitute system. And we do it peacefully, and we do it right underneath their nose like they've been doing it, and we don't need to go rally in the streets and get tasered or whatever, or beat up, or water cannoned, or laid dart, or whatever the heck they think they're going to do, or pretty soon hellfire missiles will be coming from heaven, whatever, folks. We don't need any of that. We walk back into our system and we say, listen, here's where it's no good. Let's fix it. Now, what we did is a lawsuit. We said, no, your whole system's no good. You're going to have to stop it and move out, and we're going to have to refix the thing. So we went to we did the major neutron bomb thing here on this. All the people are going to die inside. The structure will be there, but we'll have to refill it with people that are not poison and cancerous. So within that, getting to that point, interesting how these stories tie together. I keep telling you this means something in the context of life. These notices that we see, and we have the internet now to see so much more, so much faster, overwhelmingly so, but so much that why you have to start focusing on what you do. Don't worry about everything. Just focus on what you can do, what your skill set is, and what you find yourself is a wrong that needs to be right. And then look to see if anything else in the news helps to support that and move forward with that, and just disregard all the other things because that's noise. That's an interference with what your main objective would be. But in our case, we get out of Virginia right in time with this Governor Kitzhaber's lady Hayes. And to tell you the truth, folks, I don't really know these people. All these people were unknown to me except for just a couple weeks ago. Despite our lawsuit. See, I wasn't after people. We're after a systemic corruption that people are maintaining. not anybody in particular necessarily, but in general. That particular people now are being found out to be the center cores of the tips of the spears of which they advance the agenda and the oppression against us. In Virginia, apparently, or was it? I'll get to it. Maureen McDonald sentenced to a year and a day in federal prison. Apparently, there's some shenanigans going on in First Lady of Virginia. How interesting that it's coming up at a time when some First Lady out in Oregon's getting nailed. Well, maybe not that way, but, accused of conflict of interest in the least, and maybe more bribery and everything that takes down the governor. Marie McDonald was sentenced Friday to 1 year and 1 day in federal prison for her role in corruption scandal that brought down her husband's political career. See, these people have been in the system the entire time. Now, I don't know what particularly, I haven't even had a chance to go look at what this particular corruption, as I think about it, it will be very interesting to see if it's very closely related to the one that we sued to stop and enjoin across the other side of the country. If not, it doesn't matter. There's political corruption. It's in the system, and it's being found out. Interestingly, in the same week, there's been a situation going on in Virginia that now is exposed to be another corruption scandal across the country in another state. That I'm telling you, it just hasn't been caught in all the states. For her role in corruption scandal that brought down her husband's political career, McDonald's punishment was lighter than the 18 months requested by the prosecutor, but harsher than the 4,000 hours of community service proposed by the defense. If you know that the judiciary is involved in this, you know why they go lenient on their soldiers inside the offices of the people, or not, inside the substituted offices. This is the other thing that came out in our lawsuit. When we were addressing the judge who wrongly interfered and trespassed the case, committed fraud on the court, we said, you're extending your decision here, your discussion without warrant. It extended to the party you just gave a protection to, a status that he does not enjoy, in an office that he does not actually enjoy, doing something that office never gave him right to do. Now, I just gave you 3 points that if you wrote down, you'd probably go to just about anybody in any office and be able to take them out. The Washington Post notes that the McDonald was fortunate to receive the 366-day in prison because it allows her potentially to accrue 54 days off of good behavior. Well, that's just a diversion. The fortunate to receive, well, she's just a privileged class in a place there's not supposed to be privileged classes. She's part of that system of corruption, which shows you the bar is involved as well. So, enough insight there. Interestingly, a first lady takes down a governor in Virginia. We got one in Oregon that took down first lady and the governor in Oregon that took down the governor. And Oregon Governor Kitzhaber, when announcing resignation, is deeply troubling to me, where a person can be charged, convicted, and sentenced by the media. So he's disgruntled about the fact the media prosecution of him, and that forced him out of office? I don't think so, folks. Well, he could say that, but our lawsuit was a year and some months before this thing. He knew what they were doing, and he knew because his lady, first lady, I don't even know if they're married, but his first lady, the conflict of interest is over environmental issues. She was the head of organizations, and he had an aide that was integral with making interstate and international environmental compacts through the consensus process that we sued as a method of the destruction of that state, and essentially ripples out to the United States of America because of the EPA's support of the Solutions Network, which is integral with this method destruction. That our lawsuit is at the core of this whole so-called scandal. I mean, this is beyond scandal, folks. That I have a bunch of links for anybody who wants to go through it. I did only brought them up for me just to kind of see what was available to talk about more than anything else. That these people are in denial. They claim they didn't know. They claim that they divert the attention into the media when in fact we have the governor, we have the president of the Senate, we have the the Speaker of the House of the State of Oregon. We have the Bar Association. We have the political parties, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party as parties to our suit. We had a couple of representatives that have supported a bill that was all tied to this, all in our suit. There's like 10 defendants. They were served. We have lawful service proof. There is no excuse that they did not know that they were doing things in the environmental arena that were crimes, and high crimes and misdemeanors, and in fact treason. That when you look at it from our perspective, or my perspective, what this governor is, he's a continuing criminal in evasion of what we have sued out and they have agreed to. And we'll get to that in a moment. So we're looking at this news out of Oregon and the destruction through the first ladies in a whole different way than maybe even anybody could be looking at it. Reactions to John Kitzhaber's resignation. The one picture they have on this link is the one that one of the guys, Peter Courtney, who is a party to our suit, who did not answer. And by rule of the federal court, what we said was the merits of which are the truth, the admissions are the fact, and the fact becomes the truth of the agreement between the parties, the agreement of which is, by operation of law, the law between the parties. That this gentleman in this one story about Reds, they just showed him, there's another couple of people, this Courtney guy is being talked about, and I didn't even get the video. I didn't care. He's being on the record in the media to be talking about how sorry and sad it all is. What's interesting is they have the same organized criminals, Wyden, Merkley, this guy named Washington Governor Jay Inslee is involved. We find out almost the same time that we filed our suit back in June or July of 2013. They're working together on an international environmental consensus contract for environmental impositions due to climate change and sustainable development and all this stuff. They answered that. They got that contract through. They would not answer our complaint. We now have a complaint that now shows the extent that the government of Oregon allowed its authority to transgress the law and infiltrate, and you see the people in another state, another governor involved here from our lawsuit. Tina Kotek is on here. She's a party. All the players are listed in this news article that we sued, supporting the governor and wishing him luck on the way out. Folks, these people are throwing that governor under the bus. It's very hard not to believe that our comprehensive lawsuit didn't cause this. DeFazio's listed, Blumenauer, all these people are criminals, folks. Susan Bonamici, they're not named in our suit, but they're all supportive of this agenda. If you go reading through it, State Treasurer Ted Wheeler, we found out about him. We didn't sue him, but we found out he was involved when he started to say, you can take out the roads. We can take out the roads. Well, no, you can't, Mr. Treasurer. We take out the roads because we want conservation and preservation of these state parks, which we said, no, you can't do that. You take those roads subsequently to the authority of the road's existence. And they had to drop those bills, and now they put the property up for sale, which may be another crime. Because Congress designated those lands shall stay for the purposes of the school permanently. For the purpose of the schools in the Admissions Act. So again, this is title. This is the grants coming back right in prominence. Our lawsuit spoke to this corruption. I'm suggesting to you it's nationwide. I'm suggesting to you that we definitely hit the heart of the beast, and there's nothing that we're going to see as the corruption that isn't going to be the destruction of the public treasury, of the people, of the system of the people, of law, of remedy. Everything is destroyed, and we were able to identify it a year before this thing comes out into everybody else. In other words, now that people are looking at it, they don't really understand our lawsuit. Well, they may know about it now since we did the interview, but they don't. They're now coming in and looking at, we stabbed the heart of the beast, and now they're looking at the tendrils. It wasn't my research that found out that the Washington governor was involved indirectly through our lawsuit by the consensus process. Someone else did that research. I can pick it up and say, well, that was one of the tendrils. This was one of the things that this oppression and subversion allows in your states. And just to let you know, for those of you in these states, California, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia are involved, and every one of those people all have consensus projects, and I'll tell you those things are across the nation. And they all deal in advancing climate change or sustainable development. And they use a similar method, which is, when I synthesized down all these things, was what it pointed to only one thing, and that's what we were after. We went down and we found the heart of the beast by diligent research and clearly thinking about what laws were and clearly understanding what the enemy might be and what they're doing, and understanding how to identify it. And we synthesized the condition down and we struck the heart of the beast. If we were a sniper, we probably did a world record shot here. And I'm not, I don't want to, please don't believe I'm saying that to say, look at me, pat me on the back. This is how obvious it is that we are getting taken down. That in a way, it really wasn't that hard once you started looking at it, and we were obligated as the people to do so. It just happens to be that because they interfered with our production as miners, they got us to come out of the forest, they stopped us from mining, and we said, wait a minute, we're supposed to be mining. Who the heck caused this? And, you know, it might be called a dumb miner, but some of us generally are not. We just want to be left alone. We just want to do what we do. We do is noble enough to supply the needs of entire nation. You try to figure out what a miner doesn't produce somewhere that you aren't using right now. That minerals are central to the protection of everything in the society, essentially. And that's just what we do. I mean, it's not even something we even worry about. We just leave us alone. So you called us out. You called us criminals, and we came out to find out why. Well, we found out the one calling us criminal. I remember I told you folks, don't point your finger out unless you can handle the 3-point back, and they could not and will not be able to. Experts say probe of disgraced Oregon governor focusing on possible financial crimes. To me, this is, from our perspective, this is just one of the things that we talked about. They're talking about bribes. We're talking about a plunder of the entire public treasury. And I'm not going to get into the worry about that it's all fake treasury either. Let's not worry about that part. I think once we start seeing what's going on, the rest starts to come upturn, and we will see what happens here. But the legal experts say a subpoena used in a federal grand jury investigation into Oregon's fallen governor and his fiancée indicates that authorities are investigating possible violations of public corruption laws and financial crimes, including wire or mail fraud, bribery, and tax evasion. That's the least of it, folks. And I said on the interview, I said, if the FBI and the OSP, Oregon State Police, if they don't come out and they do not look at our lawsuit and what these people admitted to by not answering our lawsuit, by operation of law have confessed to doing, then the FBI and the OSP law enforcement will be lying to y'all. And I don't mean that to tell you to sit back and watch it. I want you to think about maybe you should get engaged. I mean, take our lead. We're going to be doing quite a bit more. I hope, well, we're going to be able to do it, how many people we have to do it and the knowledge to do it. But there's a whole, I think there's 3 pages of stuff we're working on to go do eventually, given the life and time and energy to do it. In enforcing this thing that if the FBI and the OSP does not go beyond what I see, I just stated and I'm reading, I just read, you will know that you're FBI. And I don't talk about this to kind of put them down and say, oh yeah, we already knew that. This is their opportunity to stand up and show us that at least in part, they're not what we already know that they are. That if they don't step up and go beyond financial crimes of mail fraud and bribery and go to the plunder of the public treasury, the destruction of the public trust. I hope people appreciate, if you listen to the interview, those of you that might have, they have the new plunderer in the governor's house. We have her on record who she wants to destroy producers and miners as well. The new one is worse than the first governor that was in there doing this. That she says we will mend the public trust. I said on the interview, I don't think people appreciate what she just said. She and they cannot. That system cannot fix the trust that was just breached. This is a magnificent failure that no one is really understanding how magnificent this is. That this is beyond just a minor public corruption. This is the failure of public trust. This is the failure of the fiduciary to maintain it. This is the failure of the failure of failing to arrest the plunder on the Treasury, empowering people without right to do so to affect and harm a whole state, and the evidence and tendrils of which go international, folks. This is how big this thing is. I'm not talking, I'm very confident on this because it's not me that said that. They agreed to this. They admitted to this through not answering the petition that stated they were doing all of this. This is not my opinion. This is their confession. And our operation of law judgment that the FBI and the OSP, Oregon State Police, ought to have already known about. I've been told that actually every filing you do in the federal court, the FBI looks into it just in case. They might actually find people thereafter on top of it, but they're supposed to look out for these things that are maybe not picked up by someone who's just complaining about a crime that's happened against them privately, but actually might be wider. So I've got a knowledge that happened a long time ago, half proof that this is exactly what goes on, that the FBI already knows about our case. And so I'll just tell you, if they want to stick to these, then the FBI and the OSP are lying to you as well. The public trust is broken, folks. The public trust is not built up by them until they start, at least these law enforcers, until they start enforcing the law. The law now is our judgment in law because these people that they're looking at have agreed to it, and way more than what we've charged. Now, you can get that our interview. That's Ron Gibson's interview with me, with Bill Meyer, talking about this lawsuit. Where it's an hour broadcast, but we only got about 39 minutes to say such with the ads, which you don't hear on the tape. It's only 39 minutes, but you can get that link here in the post-production broadcaster I set up. And you'll be able to listen to that. And I would ask anybody who has any interest in how this went through, you're going to realize we had to come at this fairly unconventional, within the rules and the law nonetheless unconventional. In other words, when you go by the attorneys, they run you down the primrose path into obscurity and destruction. We were interested in justice. And we were into a system that we've proven is not just. And that's not my opinion. There's tools in the law that we use to have, that they are required to respond in order to justify they have warrant to be where they're at and doing what they do that they could not answer. The parties of which are all part of the lawsuit. Again, when we sued the Bar Association, what judge do we get to go to now that's not a party to the suit? And our answer was what? You'll hear that, but I'll just tell you here. Our answer came back from a court of competent jurisdiction as advertised. It is. And the answer to our case was, essentially, our last filing to that court was, and our statement in the last sentence was, the parties have agreed. The process has been due and fulfilled, and the parties are in agreement. The clerk came back and said, well, if you're in agreement, this court has no jurisdiction. And isn't that the case, folks? Isn't the fact that the courts only have jurisdiction over an issue, something that's a conflict, an ongoing conflict. And what we declared was that we comply with all the requirements of due process, and the parties were in agreement. And therefore we have the agreement that between the parties is settled. And that settlement is a judgment. And the clerk answered back, because see why? The judge probably couldn't answer, at least I think, hopefully, that she's figured it out, because she was actually a party to the case by conflict of interest membership, being a bar member, even not practicing. Non-practicing members are members nonetheless. That the clerk answered back that the court had no jurisdiction. Why? Because the issue was settled a year ago, actually. So I listened for that when you listen to the interview. I've been told, and I thought we did fairly well. I think Ron believed we did fairly well. The feedback from Bill Meyer was that he got a light bulb moment at the very, very end. Ron pulled out the common sense that Ron can do very well, laid it out nice and simple, and Bill Meyer figured out something he couldn't quite get, and I wasn't able with how my responses were to settle that. So Ron does what he does, and that's why we work well together. I'll give you every way that it ought to work, and whether you understand that is whether or not you're receptive. And Ron reduce everything I could tell you down into some simple words that maybe get you to get it easier, and that's what happened. And that's the big deal there, is that we are not understanding some real basic things, and if we just asserted those, it makes a whole lot of sense. That we are on record in our lawsuit that we anticipated this whole falling out. I couldn't have predicted the falling out because it was an integrated system, but I think the shaking out is now going to expose a whole lot of inside players for a whole lot of time, that they all become party to the criminal side of this. Nobody, not one of them stopped it, and all of them knew about it. And we get that from not my work. Somebody else happened to be doing some research. Emails show secret Enviros donors tangled in corrupt Oregon web at work in Washington. I just got this a couple days ago. After all, I didn't know anything about this, folks. This wasn't what our object was, but we see the tendril working of the beast that we stabbed in the heart. All the way into California, what we talked about, the billionaires that are outside is funding all this, and I told you that story that we heard, that I reported on a long time back. That story was hiding what the government itself is giving to keep this thing going, one part of which is through the EPA and its Solutions Network grants. It goes right in to feed this thing. So here we have somebody else who's researching out of Washington, ties in this fiancée, Sylvia Hayes, and Jay Inslee, the administration through the consensus process, making international contracts, folks. Remember I told you about the word province came up. I was wondering why. That's the word that's used in places like Canada. Well, you look at the consensus, this consensus contract, and they're bringing British Columbia in. Now, I told you that showed us that they were going to be, these agreements are international, and I don't know that any of them could be lawful, and yet they exist, and they exist only through this substitute adjunct policy. They agree and admit in their own system that it's not constitutional. It does not go by anything that the law requires. And that's one of the things that's easy to identify them for then. This is not that hard of an argument. If you've never heard of this, how we're tying all this together, this really wasn't that hard. You just have to get a certain mind. You got to shed what you're told, and look, as I tell you, I've never told you anything. I probably haven't, maybe I haven't thought about it for myself. I did it that way. But when I say you take a step back and rethink, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about that I did. I go, wait a minute, now this is not supposed to be happening. Well, what's supposed to, it wasn't is. All right? The suppose was me being blind to the reality and being maintained that way by certain forces, which we find out now is just listening to believe what we think authority is telling us and the experts say. And we didn't know that was all a setup to get us to not act and not respond to literal enemies in the gate, domestic and foreign. If you appreciate this, foreign and domestic defense we were supposed to put up, and all our enforcement is supposed to do, and our military was supposed to protect. Now I just opened a new element of where our failure has been. So, again, research in Washington ties the governor there to this, the governor's, the first woman, the first lady in the office, to the governor here that just went down. Folks, if you've picked up this story in Washington, do you hear the dominoes falling across this nation over this environmental imposition? So take our lead, folks. Take what we've done and get the admissions about what they've said, find out and tie them together for yourself. Now here's the distinction between what happened to us when you listen to the Bill Meyer broadcast, and the link I'll give you is to his website, to Bill Meyer's website. It's a KMED. We did it over the phone, so whatever the quality was is because of the phones. It was good enough. And so we were able to call in, and Bill Meyer, I'm grateful that he gave us the space to do so. And the listenership to talk to, that you'll hear that when we filed our lawsuit, we filed a cease and desist. There was no answer, zero answer. We noticed everybody that was on the lawsuit of this. Everybody that was in the lawsuit had already gotten the cease and desist as noticed the same lawful way. Certified mail, return receipt requested. That's evidence of service. That's how that works. That's why you do that. That we did the lawsuit and we got the same response, silence. That's the crickets you want to hear, folks. They agreed to the lawsuit. I told you, as I say on the interview, a motion to dissolve should have been filed within about 3 to 5 days, and that should have ended it. But it didn't, because the court was corrupt. We found out the judges were corrupt. Who'd we sue? The Bar Association. It's corrupt. It's a substitution, folks. We had to figure out a way to get around that. And so you hear on the broadcast that we received no answer from the defendants, no response, lawful response from the courts in any stage of this, except the very last letter from the court, Article 3 court, that appeared to be the court of competent jurisdiction, that stated that be essentially acknowledging the agreement between the parties, and because of that, saying that court had no jurisdiction, perfecting our judgment in law. That even if we had gone the orthodox way through the rule, there's two ways to get the same thing in a way, but one's weaker than the other. We chose the stronger of the two. We wanted a judgment on the pleadings because it's a judgment in law, and that's it. Instead of doing what, folks? Some of you that follow with some of this, when someone doesn't answer in a court case, they are in what? But the term is default. The default can get you, upon motion, a default judgment. Now, the problem with a default judgment is that they're susceptible to motion to re-enter the case for some potential excuse that the party who doesn't answer can bring at some timely time in the future. And this could be up to a year, 2 years, 3 years. It all depends on the reason. And you can then have a motion to dismiss vacated, and you can enter into the case with an answer and continue the prosecution as if it started normally. We were in an injunctive remedy, an equitable remedy. It needed immediacy. We couldn't handle, we told the court that we couldn't handle this kind of a remedy that could be challenged for purposes of jurisdiction or improper or some failure of reception of service or some excuse around it. We could not have that happen in this case. And so we had to avoid the default judgment. But if we had engaged it, certainly an answer, a petition of claim that is not answered enjoys normally even a default judgment. And you obtain whatever that complaint says and what you demand that is part of your claim that the judges normally would see, and you get awarded the totality of your claim. Under normal circumstances, if there was justice, they would have issued a default judgment. The failure of the court and a court of competent jurisdiction of which to enter on our behalf to do justice shows you they didn't intend to give us justice. And I have the example right here this week of how simple this, when justice is going to happen and by operation of the rules, a defendant can be brought into liability when they don't show up, right here in a story this week. So understand, we're in the condition, had we gone, we had a filed complaint, and a claim with affidavits that had there been no answer, the rules are it goes to a default judgment. And we would be sitting with a default judgment. The problem with that, as I said, the parties we sued could come back in the future and attack it, and we'd be back into it when we weren't prepared, and it would disgorge possibly that injunction that we needed against criminal acting defendants. And so we chose to go down the other path that says, well, we have a judgment in law. Let's get the court to certify that. We couldn't find a court competent because once we all agreed that there was no issue, there's no court that can, none, folks, no court that can take jurisdiction of that case. And that's why the law steps in and says, well, the operation of law is the agreement between the parties is the law. That if we had gone down the default and just taken that, a barking dog could cost Seattle family their home, to show you the evidence of what happens almost automatically about when you get served properly or presumed so with a lawsuit and don't answer. Like bullies and illnesses, lawsuits can be ignored, but they won't go away. Denise Norton learned this valuable lesson the hard way this week when she found out that the lawsuit she tried to ignore could wind up costing Norton her North Seattle home. Her neighbor Woodrow Thompson filed a lawsuit alleging that the sound of the barking from Norton's dog, Copper, C-A-U-P-E-R, was intentionally causing him, quote, profound emotional distress, close quote, in his detailed 36-page complaint. Thomas claimed that the canine's raucous and wildly bellowing, howling, and explosive barking, close quote, was capable of reaching 128 decibels. For context, the United States Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the Department of Labor, which is commerce, folks, so at any rate, keep going. Labor Department agency tasked with enforcing safe working conditions says a person should not be exposed to a noise of 115 decibels for more than 15 minutes a day. Remember, that's constant. But we're not going to argue the merits. We're not going to show a defense here because that's in the lawsuit. That's what was supposed to be responded to if properly served in a court of competent jurisdiction. And it's presumed so in the particular case where this homeowner served that lawsuit, failed to respond. That said, according to the Center of Disease Control with this noise issue, prevention noise meter, Thompson claimed would mean that Copper's bark is louder than an ambulance siren and just slightly softer than a jet engine at takeoff. In my head, everything was so bogus that he'd been doing, I don't know why, I just didn't think it was real or something, Norton told the TV affiliate. That's why, even when she was served with papers, Norton simply didn't respond. Unfortunately for Norton, however, the suit was very real, and because she didn't challenge their neighbor's claim, Thompson, who has not spoken to the press, won $500,000 by default. There's more to the story. By default. She won by default. Now let's look at our case. We had a default. Why didn't the court come out and say you win? But for the fact that we said that the Bar Association members are criminals. And they are in our case and party to it. See, they almost can't even come in and give us the win. That this dog situation, simple dog barking issue, by default, enjoyed a $500,000 judgment. I just want you to compare the two processes. I wanted you to hear that if you didn't know this before, if you did, then I wanted to explain that, just point this out. In our lawsuit, we had no answer just like this. We were at least to enjoy the default judgment that the courts never issued. So consider how big it is what we've been doing against who we did and what we've actually exposed to the point that they are literally petrified and paralyzed to do anything with it. But legal is not law. Remember this. Proceed in the law and you can still show the crime. I hope you get appreciation of how this works. It takes a little bit of thought. Our lawsuit did not enjoy a default judgment. We deserve better. We deserve, because it's an equitable remedy. We didn't ask for money. We said just arrest the crime. That's all we asked. And the seat of decision, the Bar Association members, the judges, wouldn't do it on their own. And so we are left to do it by the law, operation of law. Our judgment is in law by the agreement of the parties, and we now have what we call the enforcement. And as I explained on the interview, what is a court but to just allow its power to enforce, to help aid enforcement of a judgment? In other words, the courts are inert. They do nothing anyway. All they're going to do is get a bigger thug with a little bit bigger badge on than maybe you have to help you go after things like what? Bank accounts? Property? Right? In fact, in this case, they didn't notice it was serious until the sheriff started stapling notices all over their house. So that's enforcement of the court. That never negates your right to enforce a requirement to enforce a judgment. In fact, the judgments are not enforced by the court; they're enforced by us. So there's a limit to what the courts do anyway. That doesn't negate our rights and our needs to cause remedy. And that's where the Jefferson Mining District is now formalizing what it received in the mail was the fact of the acknowledgement of the agreement between the parties, the law of the matter, the judgment, and upon the judgment we will be doing whatever remedy we can to enforce enjoining the government that we have found and proven, and they admit is no longer in a representative form, a Republican representative form. That should kind of make you smile just a little bit when you think about that. No, there's a lot of work going to happen here, but we're in a place that everybody has thought and talked about. We've proven it, folks. You don't, and I'm just trying to point out to you, you don't live in the government, in the state, in the country that you thought you lived. We can live there. We can get that back, but we're going to have to get it back because it's been stolen from us. In the same week, I find this interesting. Little titles come up. Always interesting. When you have a certain view, you start seeing things. And I don't see a lot of other things, so don't think that this is the end-all, be-all. You'll see your own truths as you go for you. What responds to you. Unlikely cause unites the left and the right over justice reform. Who'd have thunk it, folks? Unlikely, the left and the right. That's a fiction anyway, isn't it, right? It's just these plunderers that take that position and try to you go through that side. Usually bitter adversaries, Koch Industries or Koch Industries or whatever. Maybe I should say the vulgar, I won't. Industries and the Center for American Progress have found at least one thing they can agree on. The nation's criminal justice system is broken. All in the same last week, folks. Left and right, they're finding out they're getting blasted by the justice system. That's the Bar Association. But you know what I noticed about that? What did you notice about that last statement? That they find the nation's criminal justice system is broken. Isn't that just another news that came out at the same time to try and get your focus on a part of the judiciary? Our lawsuit encompasses the entire judiciary, not just the criminal justice system. I call it the criminal justice system for a long, long time, decades, because it is a criminal justice system. And yet now we get the big money coming in, the special interest money, going to focus our attention on the criminal justice system. And you know, typically left and right follow party lines, don't they? Republicans and Democrats. Those legal entities were parties to our suit as well. They were party and part and parcel to the plunder. So enough on that. I just wanted I wanted to go through that. I hope you listened to that interview that we did. Listen very carefully, if you will. It kind of goes a little quick, but we lay this out again, maybe a little bit more focused. And just, if you will, sit back and think about what we're saying actually. What does it mean? What is going on, and what have we exposed? And really, where this plunder has gone and taken us, and merely you look around and you just kind of wonder. There's no reason, there's no question why we are a people that are beat down, and why we are we have no wealth. And that was what this system, I told you, it's a financial construct as well. They're focusing on the financial crimes, but it ends up being bribery. I'm talking about the real stuff. I'm talking about interfering with property owners and producers that create real wealth for themselves. The society that grows up around which is us and wealthy people, that they've been beating down and stifling for an amenity in the environment, that no law says can overcome any of this. None of these laws are supposed to be interfering with our protective capacity as people. And as I say, we sued the whole system. There's always people inside a system that find themselves trapped, that try to come out and do things right from inside it. That's the only thing I hope I have, that maybe some people might work that are in there. In other words, we sued all wrong action. We didn't sue the good action that these institutions may give us. And so here we have federal interstate handgun sales ban ruled unconstitutional for all of you looking at this, and another excellent victory for civil rights. You know what we know. Civil rights is the plunder and the extortion of the government. So misstatement by these people. Maybe civil liberties would be a little bit closer, but even so, it's not civil rights either. When you're talking about the right to bear arms, or the right of altering or abolishing the government as you see fit, or altering it when it stops to serve you. You understand that's where our lawsuit is speaking. Our lawsuit is really just a Second Amendment a measure to alter and abolish or restore the other government of the new one coming in and ceasing to serve and actually acting in conflict with the laws of the United States to destroy the Republican form of representative government. We are moving a Second Amendment suit through injunction to fix that. We didn't need lead out of the barrel of a gun, though it sits there for us. And this is talking through civil rights. I'd say no, this is antecedent rights. By attorney Alan Gurrow, United States District Court Judge Reed O'Connor struck down the federal interstate handgun sales ban earlier today, finding it unconstitutional both facially and as applied under the Second Amendment and the Fifth Amendment Due Process Clause. So I won't read any more. Just point out there's certain things that go on. If you present the issue right, it's correct. I will tell you that this is it's only limited to the territorial jurisdiction or legislative jurisdiction of the federal system because it was a United States District Court, not a District Court of the United States. This was a critical distinction in our case, and allowed us to out the criminal judges involved. When you're in a United States District Court, you're in a territorial or legislative court. Those are not Article 3 courts. In fact, when we sent back mail thinking the address said it was going to an Article 3 court. The court that answered was a United States District and Bankruptcy Court. That's not Article 3, folks. That's not Article 3. And so we said, the corruption's all the way back east, too. And now they've obstructed our access to the court of competent jurisdiction or to get a transfer. It was really clear. When you understand this stuff, it's very easy to see how the corruption has pulled us off and you are dragged along by the legal system. In this case, this legislative court, this territorial court stated that even in that system, even under civil rights, the interstate handgun sales ban was unlawful, unconstitutional, whatever constitution that is for that territory. I won't even get into. So it's possible. What did it take? It took someone to put the right argument forward, folks, even in that substitute system. Another one, dealt setback. Obama puts off immigrant plan. One day before hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants were to begin applying for work permits and legal protection, administration officials on Tuesday postponed unqualified Obama's sweeping executive actions on immigration indefinitely, saying that he had no choice but to comply with the federal judge's last-minute order halting the programs. And so another judge came up, and this is in response to a judge coming and saying it won't fly. I've heard and read some things with Judge Napolitano. My disappointment with Judge Napolitano is he's not giving us the lead on how we go about taking all this down that he knows is sitting there. He just tells you about it. But notwithstanding, it's there to say he identified this. When this judge went and took that down, it's probably permanent. And he gave all the reasons why. I won't go through. You can find that video. I don't know if I have it or not. But another one, this executive officer, supposedly, I say he's unqualified, Obama signs a cybersecurity executive order. Here's another one. See, these things go in, they need to be challenged, they may not be law. But be careful, underneath the Trading with the Enemy Act, these emergencies, that executive order is an all awesome power. That has to be challenged too, in fact. But the point is that you have to know that going into your case. You have to know that going into your challenge. You may not want to challenge this at the top end. You may want to challenge it local. I don't know. It all depends on what you're feeling comfortable with. As the miner who went through his own county to stop a taxing district, he started with zero knowledge, had a little bit of support, and took it the rest of the way, folks. It's all I can tell you is it starts happening for you. You just got to start doing it. While visiting Stanford University on Friday, the unqualified Obama announced he was signing an executive order meant to encourage the sharing of information regarding cyber threats between private sector companies and the government. Well, you have to look very carefully. It's just to encourage the sharing. And so if you know that, and I've told you to read those things very carefully, if you look at the agencies, they're supposed to encourage, foster, help, grab data, monitor, evaluate, offer, advise to advance you in your productive capacity. That's what all these governmental things are actually only supposed to do. And you hear it. They're supposed to share information. But you know that part gets corrupted. Underneath the term sharing is they come in and they confiscate. You're supposed to share, so we're taking. And so this is where we have to step up and understand what the terminology actually ends up getting done in practice and challenge that wherever we can, as we can. and people with that expertise in those areas are better suited to discuss it. As I told you, I really don't focus too much on the internet. I know it's important for us in getting the message out, but as far as net neutrality, I didn't know until I read the article of someone who was in it about what net neutrality really is, opposed to what we're told it is, and that becomes a whole different and more complicated discussion to look at how these usurpers are coming in, and these lawyers, these bar members, are wording things in order to move into places they maybe not ought to. And remember, the government, this plundering, substituted government, it enjoys a presumption of lawfulness where it should never have been. And again, as we sit in a producer property class as miners, or you can be a rancher, you can be a water appropriator, you can enjoy the highways and understand that problem, and sit on the grant side of that, and you can show right in the first instance that it's wrong in the first instance, that it was a trespass and it was a felony. And we're also finding out no one understands this, that seems to be working really, really, really well. It's causing the system a bunch of trouble outside of what we sued. Just good-natured people thinking they're doing something as a representative. This bill of attainder, folks, is killing them. All these laws that affect us this way, it identifies us as it groups us, it classes us as a group of people, or a class that can be identified, and it causes a vilification, a criminality on this class. The producers are grantees. They're property. They're landed property owners that are separate, essentially. They are the foundation of the nation. You can't criminalize that. You're destroying your nation. These people are literally destroying the foundation of your nation, and no one seems to notice that. So these are bills of attainder to group people together, criminalize them when they have an absolute granted authority to do what they're doing. These arguments are very, very simple. All this stuff we heard in history class or civics class, or even getting into some legal discussions in the Constitution and reading it, these words start becoming alive now, at least to me and some of you. And even if you haven't used them but heard them but are getting closer to stepping forward to right or wrong, these are the simple answers taken me 30 years to come to. 10 years focused on something called the mining law, to come in the last year to be able to tell you really nuggets of just vastly, talk about a sword and a shield that just has no weakness. Because what you're doing is you've walked right into that constitutional no bill of attainder should happen, right? We've got it. They're doing that. So they're completely out of any authority. And anybody that advances it under color, that's a felony, if not high treason, and we're got them. If we just learn to accept that and say that. And we don't say that until we can prove it, and we don't say that until, even if we can prove it, until we can show that they intended it. Like that commissioner who votes, despite hearing the law, being blindsided by the law, he still votes to act contrary to that law. That's the guy that he needs to be brought behind the woodshed. Let's put it that way, whatever way you can find it. Now, here's the other very ominous thing that piggybacks the NDAA, and this really piggybacks the declaration of stateless war. Now it's endless war. If we hadn't seen it before, it's really in the news for us. The unqualified one, Obama sends Congress expansive anti-is. Think about this, folks. As I tell you, what is. That's what Clinton told us. You've got to figure out what is. He wants to go anti-is. See, that's the deception. Because we all know, we're finding out, the United States is part and parcel to the support of what is. And so if they claim, well, we're going to go anti-is, you think that they're coming against the bad guy, and in fact, it's just more ability to come now endlessly with that lie. Endless war. The unqualified one sends Congress expansive anti-is measure 6 months after bombing began. You understand how this thing is on its head. The pyramid's on its point. I don't know why everyone keeps showing this pyramid without a top. The reason why the top's not there, because it's upside down, stuck in the ground, folks. And we never noticed that. Turn the picture upside down and draw a ground line across the flat spot. We have to write the organizational structure, and when we're doing that. What I do is we figured that out, at least for the public land, public domain condition, and we simply go to the law, what Congress already said. We only got a few statutes, they're only a paragraph long, they're commandments, mandates to the agencies to do a certain thing, and all you got to do is force them to do that, and the world becomes more right and more righted the pyramid gets flipped and they get on the bottom, and they got the minions of the government working for us then, when you just get them to work from the law that already exists and stop them doing things like bombing before they have right, and then jump on the Congress that's allowing that, or start like we have, out them for being part and parcel through political party to the plunder that you are suffering, and more importantly, that the people that we are being quiet about are dying in other lands. And we talked about this little thing, but the Unqualified One has sent to Congress a formal request to authorize military force, with AUMF, NDAA, all that stuff, against the Islamic State 6 months after the United States began bombing Iraq and Syria. Now they've given Syria the right to direct the bombers to come in and bomb the heck out of whatever the rebels want to do against Syria. I'm going to be very interested to see what's going to happen here. You know, they've declared World War III. Jordan did that, so it's a slow motion grind right now. But this is, again, folks, if the government's over here is willing to do it to them, they're willing to do it to you, and you really need to stop and take a look at that. The resolution imposes a 3-year limit on U.S. operations, but does not put any geographic constraints on that. It also opens the door to ground to combat operations in limited circumstances. The resolution's broad language covers military action against the Islamic State, as well as individuals and organizations fighting for, on behalf of, or alongside is or any closely related successor entity in hostilities against the United States or its coalition partners. And we've seen that language expanded to you, folks. They did that in NDAA. And this is the authorization of use of military force provisions, folks. This is the statement that this guy, this Nobel laureate of peace, is put on your head and anybody else's he wants to go kill for no good reason, and no one's really stopping it that has the authority. What we see at the state level at Oregon is exactly reflected as the mirror in the federal sector, has the same way to attack it. If someone can help pick that up, you can start with our case if you want. You can start with getting in touch, markonthebeast@yahoo.com. If you're truly earnestly able and willing and dedicated, we can start to work together to have you be another point of the spear in another place, hopefully, to bring a bunch of it's like Gulliver. We're all these little Gulliver. This government's become this big Gulliver, and we're the Lilliputians tying it all down. We kind of have to do that again until we become, metaphorically become the one Gulliver that the Lilliputians are actually serving instead of destroying. So, at any rate, that may be a bad example. The point is that we have a lot to do. There's a lot of us, and we could be lots of places to do all this. A CIA contractor says we fabricated is. So you folks, it's right in the mail. All the news, all the news is the same. The Unqualified One, the Nobel lawyer, peace lawyer, it's saying we're going to do anti-is, and the CIA contractors claiming, we fabricated is. It's not even a creation; it's a fabrication. And we could see that. I've talked behind the woodshed about how this is just confirming even if this is a lie, okay, so what? Then what's the truth? That means he's a CIA guy telling a lie. And so that's the government. So we can't lose here just to go ahead and agree that whether he could say it's fabricated. I'll agree with that. Otherwise, I thought that is was actual and being funded. See, that's the only two choices I have. But fabricated, I think, is absolutely fabricated. Because the outcome is to take down Syria, and they're getting it so far. I'm gonna hold out to see what Russia does, but again, I'm not geopolitically oriented that way. But we'll see. I don't know. See where I want to go. And all of a sudden, I think that was supposed to got a missed tab placed. Utility commissioners' private emails reveal conspiracy. Again, those of you that are involved with the smart meters and the radiation and the bad radiation that's causing and killing you. If you're interested, there's a link that you can get the information for as part of a federal and state investigation into what appears to be systemic corruption involving former senior executives of PG&E and the California Public Utilities Commission. 65,000 emails have been publicly released with the link revealing collusion and conspiracy. So this is the system inside. This is an extension of what we sued to stop, and it's authorized and continued by the Bar Association and the judges who do not stop it when you come in with a complaint and use all these excuses in order to allow it to continue. Because if they actually, these climate people, these environmental, these gangrene, or whatever you want to call them, if they actually live by the precautionary principle that these smart meters could not come out. No different than we've heard that if FDA was supposed to be put on the regulations right now for aspirin, you wouldn't have an aspirin if they had to, if aspirin wasn't something that they knew about until today. Because they're going to protect you. This is how on its head it's gone, and how much we have to really get back into the game, protect ourselves. Because no one else is going to do it. I was just thinking, what, protect yourself. What? How do you do that? Well, you just get up and you resist, folks. That's what I'm asking you. Take the things I'm talking about. Resist. Resist with this information. I have I'm looking at a lot of information. I'm getting down to a few minutes here. Let me just kind of go through this because it's kind of messing up my mind here looking at it. Somehow I got a couple messed up tabs. But back around with people minding their own business and we've lost that respect for other people's business. Leaving, other people's property, don't touch it, don't complain against it. If it's not yours, leave it alone. Be careful of this one. Again, in the fabrication, luckily, maybe this place is so small that the police kind of got it, and they come in with a SWAT, but they didn't do the swatting. Family raided by police over suspected meth lab that turned out to be maple syrup. I'll just leave it like that. This is the point. People get involved. Apparently, people going to church on Sunday couldn't mind their own business, looked out across this snowy plain of trees and saw this equipment hanging on trees. Neighbors, clueless apparently, thought they were looking at a meth lab. And they called the police and the SWAT team shows up. Luckily, no one gets shot, and luckily the cops are looking out and realize what happened, and they thought it was funny. If that would have happened in other places, maybe not so funny. So this is us snitching out on other people that we really have no right to be doing any snitching at all. That you be careful of. You could be a victim of this, and this is the kind of thing we've been hearing where even the burglars are now calling the cops, and you get swatted and die. That contractor that dies because the burglar thought he saw something, or the drugs that the guy got afraid he had might be caught. He blamed the house, the homeowner, or maybe you're playing a video game, and the next thing you know, the guy you're playing the video game doesn't like what you just did. You got the SWAT team coming in and going to shoot you. This is the day we live in. So that little story is how stupid it can get. People are so absent any knowledge or courtesy to go ask or whatever. That you could be set up just cause. Not because there's cause or probable cause, just cause. Just cause we can do it. And that's when you know you live in the inverted system. You go down now and you make a policy in that place and thank the people for not coming in guns a-blazing and thank them for having reason and understanding the condition before they killed anybody. But maybe you make a policy that the cops do an independent citing of the meth lab before they take the word of whomever. In other words, they only use the call as the license to go initially look at what they can see, and that's all. That's going to bring us back into some more normalcy either. Now, I touched that case and then about people not knowing and working off of what they think they know and what they're told. Then touching here on John Rappaport's story, the CDC, mind control on a vast scale. This is the thing. It kind of reminded me about this situation. The government's in your face, telling you what you're supposed to think and what you're supposed to know and how you're supposed to know it. And it is this form of mind control, which we're coming to the day that it's acting itself out. And I can't say it was the cause of the family that was making maple syrup, but this is prevalent in people's minds. We are a weak-minded people, at least in the United States, I suppose around the world. And I say that because it seems to me where, and maybe it's just I don't know some of the governments, that if we have lots of people that have this knowledge that they're being violated, they go out in the streets and they get burned up and then torched and water can or whatever they're just showing mass force. They're not actually doing something. So we have the same limitation in all people around the world. We tend to herd up and then get attacked instead of using our individual power to be individuals and move independently, more along the lines of the guerrilla warfare, each having our own knowledge of our own skill set, maybe teaming up with groups of 3 or 4 people if we can, and then moving on our objective. That's a whole lot more easier to handle than not. But so, word to the wise, be careful of the people that have been mind controlled. They can hurt you. Vaccine uptake reaches all-time lows. Policy shifts to mandatory enforcement of criminalization for refusal. That's what did I say that before, folks? That's a bill of attainder, isn't it? When you group up a people and you make what's lawful illegal, that's a bill of attainder. If no one says this, it goes on as presumed to be the law. If you have that in your mindset, you can put that out there and make a formal addressment. If this is a rule that's coming from the federales, I would suspect jumping in and seeing if you can have your county coordinated, and you have the word that they need because they don't know. They don't know. These people that are in office are just like you and me who wouldn't have researched anything. Again, if any contract thing that's in the government, I wouldn't know anything about that. If I got into that office, I'd be as clueless about it as that. I'd be relying on the attorney to tell me. So these things that we don't study, we're susceptible to the wrong decision on. That if there's no clue about it in the mindset of the man or woman making the decision, you have to bring that with you to them. But here we have, because there's all-time low, they're even using that as an excuse to force mandatory enforcement. Look very careful, though. It is still limited toward school age type things, yet there's laws coming that says adults are going to have to get this, as we predicted behind the Woodshed, I don't know, years ago. But on the other hand, and what you should see, we talked about in another report and a scientific finding, when they come against you about this mandatory thing, Dr. Rowan says measles spread by those vaccinated, just like I told you that we saw the science stating that, and what's the vaccinated GMO measles is what's spreading. And I asked you, it'd be nice to see when they say there's an epidemic. No, I noticed the government's not taking any DNA samples of the affected to see if the non-vaccinated people are getting the GMO measles. So that would really kind of straighten things up now, wouldn't it? And don't forget, there's the wild measles, and most of us went through it. And in fact, it was pretty neat. It was just one of those things that went through the community and it was done. In fact, you all had parties in order to get the measles, to get it done and get it out of your life, for the most part. One of the things that's being destroyed that you have to understand is informed consent. And this comes up in a document. I think I'm going to look down here when I get past the title. I think this was an email that came through, and I said, finally somebody did this the right argument. Not fear-mongering, not scaremongering, not talking about all that you know and all you can pull together on the internet like I see lots of hosts do. This article, I think it is, and I'm challenging myself with my memory. This article says one of the main things you have to go through is that product insert. I concur. Let me read it. Informed consent. That product insert is the informed consent, and it's why they can do what they do to you and what you need to be able to have in your mind, in your hand, in your marker, to highlight all the things that you're not disclosing when they do disclose these things. Like, what do you mean there's human diploid cells in here? What do you mean they come from this strain over here that was gotten from this baby back in 1930-something or whatever? You got to have that in, and that sets the point. That sets the obstruction to their administrative bureaucratic imposition. But they say informed consent. Few things parents, you know my problem with that word, that term, not a word, it's a term. In law, it means something. It means you're just a custodian of whatever that ward of the state is, and it's not you possessing your own property and your in your son and your daughter. That's the produce of your marriage or a marriage, however fleeting. But normally, if you're into the real fleeting stuff, you're not into this kind of concept. We're talking about stability and family and all this. But the few things parents don't know about the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, part 1, you get the link again. I went down, and they go through all these discussions, but they said part 1, MMR vaccine safety. Right in the top, when they get into the discussion of the very, very basics of what they need you to know, documentation of adverse events following vaccination. That wasn't even it. The start of the basics was a list. The list of the things that start to get you to find that is right on the top. It says MMR package insert. MMRV Pro Quad package insert. the top two most important things that you can get beyond everybody and most everybody is to get those product inserts. That's the disclosure that they use to inform you that if you don't address and have and stick it in someone's face, you stick it in your hip pocket, you stick it in your bag of facts, your bag of law, you put it in your mind if you can remember it, that you assert those damages and those harms, and then you read the rest of this article once you do that, and you start applying the rest of the things that they bring here to understand if you're going to protect yourself against those that want to make mandatory anything. In particular here, vaccines. The package inserts on medicines are paramount. Forget anything else. You don't even need it, actually. It says right in the harm that it either does or they haven't tested for. That's good enough. It's right there to be harmful. Now, their authority, does it include the ability then to take and make you a group of people that says that you don't want to be harmed by this and then force you to do it? No, that's a bill of attainder. That's unconstitutional at every level. How simple that answer can be, on top of other things I talk about. I'm only bringing that out because we're forcing that down everyone's throat who wants to resist, and the most resistant are the ones that are really in the seats of decision and control of the system, and that's the Bar Association members, actually, who don't know about that. We've just got confirmation about that. Parents and vaccine-injured children speak out. Well, two words again, parents and children. That's the custodian of the ward of the state. And your son and daughter becomes the ward of the state. And you didn't know that. And you didn't know to say, no, that's my son and daughter. It's not your property, but mine. For as much as that might shock you, that's what your answer is going to have to start to be. And then you're going to have to act or conduct yourself in such a manner as to prove that you have that possession and they are trespassers to it. In other words, I hear lots of people saying, well, here's sui juris, use it. No, sui juris is not something you call yourself. It's something you do. It's how you conduct your, if I can say, business. It's how you conduct yourself. You example sui juris. You don't just title yourself. Because if you don't example sui juris in your conduct, the first misconduct brings you into some other status and you get beat up over that. Parents and vaccine-injured children speak out. The guilt is huge. Now, I don't want to read no more. That title's enough. This is the Tyler's father problem. You listen to experts, they tell you to do something, and then they kill your son. You listen to experts, and you don't bring out the fact and read the product insert, the package insert has all the answers about how wrong it is for you and anybody, and they kill you. They kill your loved one. Not your child. They killed your son or your daughter, your loved one. They kill your granddaughter or your grandson. They kill you. They kill your grandmother, grandfather, and the guilt is huge. You know that. Put this in the little list. Who has the right to put that on you? The parent. You see all these misstated websites. Drives me nuts a little bit. If we had a better acknowledgement of the terminology being used, we would slowly move our mind into the better discussion. The parent of the immunocompromised child who thinks my kid is a threat. Parent, child, and kid. Your son and daughter is not a little goat. It's not a ward of the state, and you aren't the custodial agent of that ward. But not necessarily. Despite that, the parent of the immunocompromised child who thinks my kid is a threat. Excellent discussion. Gives you a whole list of stuff to do. It's a dialogue against those that would cause mandatory vaccinations because they think the unvaccinated are the threat to the vaccinated. That thought alone should just have you in stitches if it didn't mean you, by that imposition, have lost your self-determination. And that was not, your self-determination is not a crime. They're criminalizing it. That's a bill of attainder. It's unconstitutional on its face. Of one of the many things you can bring forward in immediately addressing this on the administrative side. Doctors against vaccines, the other side of the story is not being told. Just another link, more information. If you don't understand this, more information from somewhat, if you will, at least the system believes is there as an expert. You're using their words against them, essentially, or their licensees against them. Understand what I just said there. They have you in commerce because you have to go through their commerce to get even cared for. if you didn't think that this was all pretty tied up, that you were some beast of burden, that they're some farm animal that they're taking care of in commerce. Workforce productivity, highest yield from the human investment to include higher workforce productivity, and major gains, a higher yield to the state as a major asset. Go read the words to see the truth of what I'm saying, and don't make it a question to yourself. Don't let what I'm saying be over the top of your head. Let it hit you right in your third eye, hopefully. Let it hit right there, whatever you think that is. Let it hit right there. Clarity is very stunning. Officials declare eating healthy a mental disorder. Another color of authority. The psychopathy in psychiatry. Fascinating. Eating healthy is a mental disorder. I mean, it's simple. I just want to read the titles. I was going to read some stuff, but I'm going to kind of run out of time here. But if you believe in certain types of proper eating, they've given a term to that. It's orthorexia nervosa. That's a pathological obsession for biologically pure and healthy nutrition. Now, I don't know about the obsession, but what about just biologically pure and healthy nutrition? That's been defined to be a mental disorder. This is what they're doing. And that organization, that's self-fulfilling, it's like the Bar Association, made-up, fabricated facade is in your life. It's what is destroying you as a people, and I'm asking some of you to step up, take that as when you do the vaccines, take on that one. Because they'll partly use that to say you're mentally deficient, right? I mean, this is how they do that. So you got to be able to attack that whole organization to be the facade, the fraud, the corrupter of all that you know in that subject matter. And before I get to the very, very end here, when you got the pyramid upside down, this is what you get. Border Patrol ordered to release an illegal alien. Drunk drivers, allow them to go on their own way, is what they're being told down in the South in the border states. And this, if you got to understand what this is going on, these are actually aliens that are not subject to our law, and they can't be because of the commerce, because that's what your driving is all about, and because if they do that, they'll be in violation of a NAFTA, GATT, and all that kind of stuff. And they could be subject to lawsuits. And so they're not telling you all that, but that's what's going on, why these international agreements were no good. All right, so quickly, but getting back to somebody in the system that maybe fed up and sick of it, the fraternity. This is stated by someone who was in the system. The corruption of the legal system exposed by a judge. It is what we did in suing the Bar Association in total, and suing the people that are also in the political spectrum, the legal associations that come underneath that system of Model Business Corporation Act. When a lawyer puts a robe on, takes the bench, he and she is called a judge, but in reality, when judge looks down from the bench, they are lawyers looking upon fellow members of their fraternity in another area of the free enterprise system. This would be seen as a conflict of interest. This gentleman goes through, he's an old judge, benefited from the system, but he's had it. He's seen it. It's no good. He realizes it's no good, and he's talking out about it. It'll give you an insight of what's going on and how one aspect of it, we knew that, but hit it from a different aspect. And from that agency and organization and the sucking, they moved this legal association, this professions organization into a state, into an agency of the state, completely criminal. And so we have to call that out. We have to start calling it out. And so I think I'm coming to the end here. Do appreciate you tuning in today. Hope I helped out, bring up some things, and give you some things to think about, some things to use, more importantly, some things to use in defense of yourself and maybe others. Thank you for supporting Grimner, reallibertymedia.com with whatever donations you can, ucy.tv, worldtruth.org. Maybe join up to the social network and support World Truth, because they run the servers that we're broadcasting out of ever so graciously. And any broadcasters, FM broadcasters and AMs, thank you very much. Small Power, thank you very much. Don't hear a lot of you about too much of that, some, but anyway, support everybody as you can, where you can. You have a skill, start to use it, start to empower others with it. Don't be bashful to find a limit to that, and then maintain that little narrow set of skills, because that's probably your best ability to become actually viable and empowered without spreading your energy all over creation to try and frenetically get something done. There is an approach, a strategy and techniques you can use, and I hope you can hear some of that in what I'm telling you. That's really what I'm really more about than trying to tell you the news, which is just notice of how we're being taken down and all the places we get to use to take them out and reorient what's going on and make it what we thought it was supposed to be. Take care.